The best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Good evening. Hello. Welcome back. This is Nick, creator of Hayes Reviews. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me. It is lovely to have you here tuning in live for another live stream, live reading. We're continuing tonight with Zbigniew Brzezinski's book, Between Two Ages. It came out in 1970, but it seemed to have an uncanny, almost supernatural, prescient amount of predictions, and it's amazing to me that it was written as long ago as it was. But welcome. It's good to have you here. If you're tuning in on the replay, please remember that there'll be a pinned comment below each video with some timestamps in it. You can use that to navigate ahead to tonight's reading if you want to skip me rambling for a little bit at the start. As we wait for people to arrive and to show up, we've got Turbs over on Rumble, Frank, Mindhack, and General Meow Meow over on YouTube. General Meow Meow, that's an excellent screen name, and I'm sure it gives you a nice warm fuzzy feeling every time somebody says it aloud on a live stream. But it's a good one. So we're back tonight, and this is part 7, part 2, because last Friday we tried to do part 7 and it all went a bit Pete Tong. I think the ghost of Zbigniew was interfering again, and everything went a bit kaput. We had some technical difficulties. The sound went bad. The video went bad. YouTube went down. Rumble carried on going, and so you got to see a little bit of me just swearing and frowning at the screen, trying to figure out what had gone wrong and what I can do next time to stop it going wrong. So I'm hoping that I have made some changes that'll allow this broadcast to go on unhindered, but we shall see. If you do notice any strange happenings with the audio or the video, please let me know in the chats. I do have them open and I can see your messages coming in. So let's give this a go. It's very good to be reading this book. I was just thinking about how amazing it is that Zbigniew seemed to predict so many of the things that we're now living through. And it got me onto a wider reflection, which was that a lot of these books come out, I think, that they write them as though they're warning us about something that's going to happen, when in actual fact, they're telling us what the plan is and what's going to happen. By they, I mean the sort of the elite, the powerful people, the movers and the shakers, the social engineers, the world controllers, many different terms for them. You choose the one that you like the most. But I'm just talking about they, They, the hierarchy enslaving you, the people who design the systems and perpetuate them. They roll out financial systems, economic systems, cultural systems, religious systems, educational systems, all of them, all of these things. They are artificial, they are man-made, and they are serving a purpose, and they're not serving you and I, they're serving the people who designed them, and nothing is happening by accident. There's a huge plan in place. Alan Watt liked to refer to it as a business plan because, of course, people are making money hand over fist, and money is part of the control system as well. It's artificial, it is man-made, it is designed to serve a purpose and to have a certain effect. And all of our systems, the ones that we're living in, they're not broken. We are not just struggling along, trying to do our best with the best systems that have ever been invented, making it up as we go along. No, they're all working perfectly. And the chaos which is about to ensue and which is ensuing and which we're experiencing in our lives is planned. That's part of the goal, to bring in a lot of chaos, right? And there's this phrase which is very well known, and it's order out of chaos. And what you find is when you read these kinds of books, Zbigniew Brzezinski and others, they're always talking about world order. There's plenty of books with that in the title. I'm just looking over my shoulder to grab one for you. One I was just looking at earlier. Where's it gone now? It was one, there it is. So this one here is In Pursuit of World Order. There you go. They've got it right on the front cover. They're trying to put the world in order. So when people come along and they tell you, oh, there's no conspiracy for a one world system of control, then you can say, well, why are they writing books about it? And to that end, I should mention that I did put together a resource that I've worked very hard on recently. It is a sort of paper trail giving you a whistle-stop tour through 12 books spanning 70 years that reveal some of the most candid admissions and frank declarations of this plan to build a one world system of control. And that paper trail can be yours for free if you go to continuityofcontrol.com, and you can check that out, have a look at it, and you'll get it delivered to your inbox, 1 email a week. And I think it's a pretty good resource. And at the end of that weekly 9-week time, you can download the whole thing, print it out, pass it around, send it to other people. It's hard to ignore the evidence in this series. It's because it's mainstream books. It's books written by authors that are well known, people who were close to the centers of power, people who were influential in democratically elected governments, for example. These are people who are financiers and businessmen. So they're not fringe tinfoil hat lunatics. These are mainstream people, mainstream voices telling you about their plan for world order. So that's continuityofcontrol.com, and you can sign up and grab that resource for free. And I think you'll enjoy it. I did put a lot of work into it, and I think it came out pretty well. And the concept behind it is mountains of writing in minutes of reading. And the idea is that you don't have to read the 3,900 pages that are in these 12 books. Instead, you can, for about 3 to 5 minutes a week over the course of 9 weeks, adding up to about an hour's reading in total, you can get the gist, you can get the sweeping big picture view, you can get the threads that go throughout all those books, and you'll save a lot of time by taking in this information in that fashion. What I'm trying to do right now as I talk is pull up the sort of preview image that I made for this. I should have had this ready, but we're broadcasting late tonight, and the reason we're broadcasting late is because life has things in it that need to be done, and sometimes those things need to be done before you can do the fun stuff, such as live streaming and reading books to people over the internet, because that is the fun stuff as far as I'm concerned. What else are you going to do on a Friday night? I've said it before and I'll say it again. So I'm just trying to pull up this image. The problem is I went through so many iterations trying to find the version of this that I felt most good about putting out publicly and getting feedback and sharing it around to people with much more expertise in the graphical arts than I have. And I have zero. So anybody's input was valuable to me, and I did farm out for some feedback, and then I got it. And once I got it, I doubted it, and I second guessed it, and I questioned it, and I ignored it. And it was just this whole process that went on for far too long. But eventually I settled upon this. And this is the preview image, and I'll move myself a little bit lower out of the way there so it doesn't get in the way. So what you've got here is Continuity of Control. It is 12 books. There are 10 authors, I think, because we covered 2 books by the same guy. 2 of the authors actually have 2 books on there. But you've got from left to right here, H.G. Wells, Julian Huxley, you've got Bertrand Russell. That horrible, scary, dead eye right there is none other than Charles Galton Darwin himself. Then you got Aldous Huxley, Carol Quigley, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who we'll be visiting and spending some time with tonight. This is Alexander King. And then on the far right here, with one of the most evil eyes of the whole collection, is David Rockefeller. And I was talking to friends of mine and passing this image around now saying, who do you think looks the least evil? And I think, to my mind, it's Carol Quigley. He actually looks the least like he wants to watch me tortured to death out of all these. But that's the project, is continuityofcontrol.com. And if you head over there, I'll pull up the webpage for you now. And that the webpage also took an inordinate amount of time for me to design and get it right. And hats off to you graphic designers out there, because what a job it is to design a web page and get it looking all sleek and sexy and just coherent and logically ordered. Oh my gosh, I don't know how many hours I poured into just adjusting font size and moving these lines around and this button, and do I have it wider and what color and all this kind of stuff, and which fonts should I use. Goodness me. But it's here and I'm happy with it. And I got to thanks to Andrea from Cutting Through the Matrix Book Club, who put together this snazzy, colorful mosaic of the book covers that I'm talking about in this series on the right. I think it's a beautiful image. I really do like it a lot. And so this is what you'll see, continuityofcontrol.com. You hit this Tell Me More button, and this is what you're going to get, the big picture. You're going to get the big picture in their words, 3 to 5 minutes per week, so it's easy to read. And then you get to download the full thing at the end in PDF, yours to keep, pass it around, tell other people about it. And then you can just put your name and your email here and hit the button, send me the quotes, and then you'll start the sequence, and then you'll get the first one immediately, and then it'll come in each week after that. So I'm really proud of it. I think it's really good. It's a valuable little resource. And I think even if you're familiar with these kinds of authors and these books, I think you might still find some quotes in there that you haven't heard before. And even if you have read all these books and you do know all these quotes already, I think you'll find some links and some connections and some little tidbits of trivia and continuity in there that you might not have heard before. I'm hoping there's a little something in there for everybody. And when I was making it, I was surprised at some of the connections that came out and the aspects of the continuity that I unearthed. So there it is. Hope you enjoy it if you decide to take me up on that offer. And I would love any feedback for anybody who does. So if you do, go through the series and let me know what you think. So we got Hal 1984 and LJ jumping into the YouTube chat as well. Good to have you here. Hal says, I signed up for it and still nothing received. Perhaps need to try again. I am sorry to hear that. If that is the case, send me an email at this email address that I just put in the chat. If you send me an email to that email address, I can manually add you, and then it will trigger off nicely. So that's another thing I should say. Any problem signing up? If you're not getting the emails, do tell me, and then I can do it manually. And I'm available Telegram, Instagram, all the usual places. And you can find all my contact details at allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. Adam's here. Good evening, Adam. Hope you're doing well. So that is my upfront shilling of self. But I do think it is a good, worthwhile resource to have hold of. And I'm really eager to get people's feedback. And so let me know. Tonight, the main event, we're going to be going through Between Two Ages, Zbigniew Brzezinski. We're going to be cracking on with the chapter we did not get to finish last Friday because my internet and laptop crapped out on me. But this is chapter 3 of part 2. Part 2 of the book is called The Age of Volatile Belief. And we've had chapters 1 and 2 in this part 2. It's confusing to talk about parts of the book and chapters as well. And he's labeled them in a kind of frustrating way because he's sort of restarted at number 1 in each part of the book. But we're in part 2, which is The Age of Volatile Belief. And part 2, chapter 1, was the quest for a universal vision. And he was talking about how religions failed to unite the world, and the nations, of course, won't unite the world. That's a failure of the nation state. You can't unite the whole globe under one nation. That's called colonialism or imperialism or something like that. And we're not supposed to do that anymore. And then the other thing he talked about was ideological universalism, and coming up with a sort of ideology, a belief framework or a structure or a system that we can get most people behind. And he didn't really talk about it specifically, but to my mind, that is what we've got with the UN and the Sustainable Development Goals and the scientific humanism which was outlined by Julian Huxley in his book about the purpose and philosophy of UNESCO, which is the educational arm of the UN. Humanism seems to be the thing that we are all expected to sign up to now and subordinate ourselves to. And it's hard to argue against humanism if you don't know what it is, because it sounds good, right? Yeah, humans are good. I like humans. All humans have the same rights. And therefore, if we all agree on humanism and its basic propositions and tenets, then that'll make the world a better place, because we can respect all humans everywhere, stop killing them, lift them out of poverty, get rid of the war machine, and give the internet to everybody, and everybody can have a nice time arguing on Facebook. that seems to be the utopian dream of a lot of these types of people. But uniting the world under one sort of ideology, a universal ideology for everybody. That was what he was talking about as well at the beginning of part 2. After that, we had a part 2, chapter 2, which was turbulence within institutionalized beliefs. And he talked about Marxism and Christianity and the privatization of belief as well. So he's painting this picture of how everything we've got, everything that came before, is no longer going to serve us in this technotronic era. And I'll remind people as well that earlier on in the book, he defined the technotronic era as the post-industrial stage of our societies. And by our societies, I'm talking about the northern societies, or the developed and wealthy societies. There's different phrases that he uses, but this book and also the First Global Revolution, which I'm reading in the book club at the moment, they make a very clear demarcation and differentiation between the Western, rich, developed countries who've enjoyed an uplift in material comfort and luxury, and we've got our cars and our nice houses and our central heating and our aircon and our refrigerators and our electricity and all the other gadgets and gizmos of modern life, and we've got all that because of our use of cheap energy by way of fossil fuels. But now that we've discovered that fossil fuels are extremely bad for everybody, we in the rich developed countries are going to have to stop using them. We're going to have to deindustrialize. We're going to have to reach net zero carbon emissions, in fact, while at the same time encouraging and allowing and helping all the non-wealthy, non-developed countries to go through the same process we went through, using cheap energy, fossil fuels, to get to where we are. It's an insane proposition, but that's the sort of the thrust of the narrative that they're putting out there. And Zbigniew Brzezinski in this book kind of refers to the same idea, but he calls it the technotronic era. And what he's saying is that we don't produce things anymore. We're not working in factories, building things, putting them together. We're not manufacturing or processing goods and commodities here anymore. That's been farmed out to China. What we do here now is, push pixels around all day and slap keyboards mainly. And he does talk about this effect of technology on our lives and how it leads to various kinds of effects on people. One of the effects he talks about was, now that we are, or I shouldn't say now, because he wrote it in 1970, but he said pretty soon we're going to be hooked up to a vast amount of information and data coming in from all over the world, and it's going to cause the individual to suffer and struggle because they will be inundated with all this news, quote unquote news, this new information, from all sorts of places, that and it'll be things that they can't do anything about, but it'll still weigh on them heavily, and it'll sort of render them ineffective and overwhelmed, and it'll harm them, basically. He also talked about how living rooms would be invaded by way of televisions and the programming and broadcasts that are sent out by way of that little idiot box that it used to be called. It doesn't get called the idiot box so much anymore. I heard that a lot growing up. Don't watch too much TV. You'll get square eyes. That was another one. Nowadays, nobody really seems to have that problem, because not only have we got the big glowing rectangle. We've got the medium-sized glowing rectangles and the small glowing rectangles as well. And so you can watch TV while playing a game on your tablet while having a FaceTime video call on your phone. And so they've really turned it up to 11, and nobody seems to be as concerned about these screens as they used to be, which is quite interesting, isn't it? But that's part of what Zbigniew told us about in the early parts of the book. This inundation of information, this connected world we were going to be heading into, and the way that it would lead to things like massive amounts of unemployment because there weren't so many jobs anymore. Now that we're not producing or manufacturing or doing any sort of industry on these shores, there's not going to be any jobs. What are the jobs that are left for people to do? You know, there's just really not that much out there unless you're willing to sit at a laptop all day long. And I was saying earlier today that a lot of this work is what David Graeber called in his book of the same title, bullshit jobs. It's not really work. You're not doing anything. You are having meetings about meetings. You might be moving some data around in an Excel spreadsheet or database of some description. And it's really neither here nor there whether or not that job gets done. There's not a lot riding on it. And the way I think about this is that we've been kind of molded into bureaucrats. And this, I think, is by design and deliberate, like everything is, but it's pulling people away from having any real world skills that they can barter with, that they can use to enhance their own independence, to maybe decouple a little bit from the systems, right? The goal seems to be get everybody dependent upon the systems, get everybody suckling on the teat of the social welfare type of opportunities that are provided to people out there. And so in order to do that, you got to de-skill people. You've got to make people kind of useless, make them unable to change a light bulb or rewire a plug socket or a light switch or something. And this way you can sell them things and you can just keep them under control more easily. Whereas the person who comes along and knows how to grow their own food and repair their own make and repair their own clothes and repair their homes and do all these important things around the house that are needed to maintain a home, then they're going to have more independence and they're going to have more freedom. So basically knowledge and skills and community leads to freedom. And this movement, this kind of open conspiracy, as H.G. Wells calls it, is really against human freedom and against humanity itself. It's a very anti-human movement as well. And so Zbigniew is my nickname because I keep goofing up his name when I try and say it. Zbigniew is telling us about some future stages in this plan, and it's amazing to read the book because we've lived through the times and we've seen those things come to pass. And then it leads that question. It leads to the question of, well, was he just predicting the future, or was he telling us the future, only couching it in words of warning? Because if he just came out and said, this is the plan and this is what's going to happen, he'd probably get a slap on the wrist. Maybe he'd shoot himself twice in the head and commit suicide. And probably wouldn't have had such a long and productive and illustrious career. But as it was, because of the way he wrote the book as a warning, in this style of predicting, we got to be careful that these things don't happen, and then they just go out and do the things that they're warning about. Because the tech guys all do that, don't they? They kind of like, I see all these thumbnails on YouTube. You know, grandfather of AI tells you nobody knows what's coming, and they didn't prepare for this, and it's like these warnings happen. These so-called whistleblowers and insiders come out and they ramp up the fear and they tell you how dangerous this thing is, and they just go ahead and do it anyway, which tells you that these aren't warnings, and these are just revelations, and the purpose is to frame them in the language of warning to get you scared, get you fearful, get you paranoid, get you worried, get you hooked on doom scrolling and fear porn and clickbait and all that other stuff, just to keep you disengaged, to keep you engaged in just consuming this terrifying information and disengaged in actual reality where you could be going out and doing stuff and getting things done. Mindhack says Elon Musk. Yeah, exactly. He's a great example. You know, he'll be like, oh, AI is going to do all this terrible stuff, and then he'll go and build companies and invest in it massively and embed it into his social media platform and all this other stuff. So it's a real, they're kind of, I don't know what the word for it is exactly. They're sort of laughing at us when they come out with these warnings. And I feel like Zbigniew's doing a bit of that in this book. But this book was so impressive that it led to his being invited to start the Trilateral Commission by David Rockefeller. So I believe this book impressed David Rockefeller so much that he said, hey, Zb, come over here. Let's start another unaccountable, unelected, private group think tank of influence and power and policy making that is above and beyond the nation, above and beyond the democratic process and the scrutiny of Joe and Jane Public, right? But, you know, nothing to see here. They're just philanthropists and they just love us and they're just trying to make the world a better place for everybody. That's all. So anyway, that's a little spiel, a little background, a little bit of an intro to the book and what we've read so far. The section we're in tonight is called Histrionics as History in Transition. Now, I'll tell you right off the bat, up front, I don't know what histrionics means. Histrionics. It sounds like some made-up term used to confuse people because you got history. What's histrionics? Shall I look it up quickly? We'll do a bit of research on the fly. Let's check out one of my favorite websites, dictionary.com. It's only my favorite website as much as that I use it all the time because there's a lot of words I don't know. And I like the thesaurus as well. I like to look up the thesaurus and, sound smart by using words that I couldn't think of myself. Histrionics. There we go. Okay, so it's a noun. It's dramatic representation, theatricals, and acting. All right. Okay, I'm glad we looked this up. That fits in really nicely with the subtitle of the book, which is America's Role in the Technotronic Era. And I've pointed out in some of the previous videos that a role is something you perform. It's something that is written and designed and planned and defined by the scriptwriter in the case of a film or a play, or the people who set up the company. If it's maybe a job, a role that you do at work, for example, they'll have different roles and they'll tell you the standard operating procedures and the behaviors and the expectations and the tasks you have to complete. And this is a bunch of things that you wouldn't do if you weren't being paid and you didn't need money, right? You wouldn't just get up and go be a civil engineer, I don't think, if unless you were in a system which forced you to earn money so you could pay your taxes and then spend the rest of the money, the little bit you have left over, on toys. If you went in a system that forced you to do that, a lot of this work, quote unquote work, a lot of these quote unquote jobs, nobody would be engaging in any of these kinds of activities, I don't think. I mean, there'd be a lot of it that would get done because people do like fixing things, mending things, building things. That, I think, would still get done. But a lot of the jobs, like the bureaucratic jobs, the assurance jobs, these kind of people who come in and they look at everything and they try and find the problems and they're just kind of nosy. There's another word for it, assurance. These sort of red tape kind of enforcers, these inspectors, these... there's another word that's on the tip of my tongue. I need to get onto the thesaurus and find it. But my point is that a role is defined and designed by somebody else, and then you come in and you perform it to the best of your ability. And so it's interesting that America has a role to play in this technotronic era. So it's a country. Supposedly it's a democratic country. Supposedly it's full of hundreds of millions of people who vote, and they control and decide what happens in that country and what direction it takes and what goes on and who gets elected and who gets to lead it and all that sort of thing. The people are in control, right, of this country. So how can this country have a role, and who's defined and designed this role? and it's the role in what's the wider context that this role is existing within. That word is so loaded, and I have so many questions about its use, that I'm not surprised that this little bit of learning we just did about the word histrionics, to find out that it is about drama and theatricals and acting. So that is very curious indeed. And there's a secondary meaning here, which is behavior or speech for effect, as insincere or exaggerated expression of an emotion, dramatics and operatics. Okay, and the example underneath is, cut out the histrionics. We know you're not really mad. So I genuinely didn't know that this word meant that, and I don't think I would have guessed it either. If I had to guess what histrionics meant, I would have gone with some sort of academic discipline that studies history of some sort. But there you go. It means it's some sort of melodramatic, being over the top. I guess being a father, my child will engage in some histrionics at some point, being asked to go to bed, and there'll be the whole sort of, oh, God, I want to go to bed, the drama, falling to the floor, having a tantrum, all that sort of thing. Not all children do that. I'm hoping mine doesn't, but you never know. But the histrionics, it sounds like something that is performative, let's say. So that's good to know. So the section of the book we're in is talking about histrionics, performative theatricals and acting. So let's go back to this title again. It's Histrionics as History in Transition. So it's dramatic representation as history in transition. See, I can barely get off the title of this chapter. This is how tough this book is to read and analyze. But I suppose it's this idea that a lot of history and what we are told is narrative. It's story. I mean, it's his story. Whose story? Who wrote it? Literally, the word history is made up of his story. So a story is fiction. A story is made up. A story does have characters. And if you represent that story on a stage or in a film, then you do assign roles to certain actors who read from a script and fake emotions, and then we are told that they are stars, and then we all follow the stars, right? So it's interesting, this topic, this idea of history as theatrical, as dramatic representation. That title on its own sort of suggests that history there's more to it. It's not exactly as we've been told. And so on the previous stream, we read through a section called Escape from Reason. And now we're going to be jumping into a section called The Political Dimension. And I can't recall that much about the previous section. Let's see if I underline some stuff. I know it had a lot of massive footnotes. But it seems that oh, that's it. He was talking about students and student revolutions in the 60s, echoing some previous student revolutions, except he was saying that they weren't really revolutions. They were just performative. They were just people playing at revolution, people wearing the uniform and shouting the slogans and marching in the streets, but actually achieving nothing and not really participating in a true revolution. And so that's quite an interesting concept. I think these kind of movements often get they get drummed up, they get given to us, and then the people who go along with them and take part in them blow off all this steam, and then they feel really good about themselves because we're changing the world by walking around in the streets, banging drums and smoking weed and jamming up the streets so the buses and the cars can't get through, ruining people's days, stopping them from getting to work, getting them in trouble with their boss. And none of these actions actually affect the people higher up at the top of the pyramid who are just sitting smoking cigars in their gentlemen's clubs and don't care. But they feel good because they know that you're blowing off a load of steam, and you feel better. And then, once the protest is over and the march is over, you go back to your life, carry on paying your taxes, carry on doing your job, carry on with the humdrum sort of daily grind. And but nothing's really changed. You've just spent an afternoon blowing off steam. It's kind of the same thing that happens with sporting events. The men all go to the sporting events, they shout, scream at each other, drink a few pints of beer, and then maybe they'll have a fight with a fan from the opposite team. And in this way, the aggressive energy of the males is burnt off. It's dissipated. It's gone. It's just wasted, and that helps prevent the men all getting together and going, do you know what, this group of people calling themselves government is screwing us over every day. It's stealing from our children and our grandchildren by way of debt and debt repayments and taxation, and they're building a world that looks absolutely terrible. Maybe we should all get together and do something about it. But instead of men getting together and making these plans and forming groups to go and take these kinds of actions, they instead go and watch the football and scream at each other, and that energy gets wasted. And so it's a very clever. So it's a similar kind of thing. All these big events, all these places where you can go and let loose and alter your consciousness with substances, get immersed in loud sounds and music, or big screens, and maybe the cinema is another good example. These are all sort of places where you can escape, burn off some energy, and then it helps you return to the humdrum reality and tolerate it and deal with it and carry on going through it, right? So Bitcoin Mining says communal vasectomy. That caught my eye because I don't think I've ever seen those two words put next to each other before in any context. This is what Hayes Reviews is all about. Brand new combinations of familiar words in ways that you've never seen. That's tonight's winning phrase, communal vasectomy. I like it. Thank you for that one. So let's get into the book. I don't have anything else prepared or preamble, rambly type stuff to do. We'll just do some reading and see where it goes. I'm going to have to adjust my chair a bit though. So thank you for bearing with me on starting the broadcast late tonight. I appreciate your kind patience and understanding. I do have a glass of milk here, and I do think we will make good progress. I did a reading from The First Global Revolution in book club on Wednesday night, and we've made good progress on this. We're actually coming up to the end. This is really good. And even in here, they talk about one world. They talked about one world in the section that we just read. I'll find it for you. No, that was it. They talked about not one world, world order, right there at the very bottom at the end of the page. So this phrase, world order, you find it all over the place, right? You find it all over the place. Like I was saying, that book I showed you before, First Global Revolution, has it. There's another one. There's another one up there somewhere. I've got too many books. Ha! Just kidding. You can never have too many books. But tonight we're carrying on with the political dimension. And when I was reading from the First Global Revolution on Wednesday, I was finding myself getting quite ranty and finding things to go off on tangents about and sort of, bang my hand on the table and another thing. So it was a lot of fun. I like doing that. And I'll see if I can come up with some good spontaneous rants tonight as well. As Timmy says, the rambles are always better than the books. Do you know I did a poll in the Telegram group and I said, what's the best bit, the preamble rambles or the books? And it came in about 3-1 in favor of the book reading. So there you go. Some people, that's That's democracy. There you go. But I like both parts, and I think it's good to include them both and have a balance. So let's continue today with the political dimension. The distinction between the two is important to an understanding of what was involved and of what it portends. It's going to be difficult to pick this up without knowing what was talked about in the section before, isn't it? Maybe we could go back and we'll do the previous paragraph because it seems to link into this political dimension section. So the previous paragraph was, to define the historical significance of these events, it is necessary to look beyond the violence and the slogans, beyond the superficial similarity among the outbursts that swept so many cities in so many parts of the world in so short a time. A closer analysis immediately reveals an important distinction. Some aspects of the manifestations were clearly political in character and purpose. Others, though linked with the political, though sharing with it a certain universality of aspirations, and though providing it with a mass emotional base, were much more socio-psychological in origin and vaguely moral and ethical in content. Linked together, each tended to obscure the specific character of the other. So, that's reminded me, jogged my memory a little bit of this previous section. He was talking about how revolutions used to be political, but nowadays they are more about morals and ethics, and they have more of a socio-psychological underpinning, which is interesting when you think about the sort of George Floyd riots, protests, fiery but peaceful protests, I think was the official line on those. I mean, even in England, they were tearing down statues and chucking them in the rivers in Bristol, where we were. So these groups of people getting together, they drop off a pallet of bricks and they pick the bricks up and start smashing up businesses. They're not doing it for a political reason. They're doing it for moral. They think they're doing it for moral and ethical reasons. I'm going to smash your business up because it's my moral duty. It's the right thing. I've got to do it. And then also socio-psychological as well. So that was kind of the gist of that previous section. So we'll move into political dimension now. The distinction between the two. So when he says the two, he's talking about in the one hand, there's the political revolutions, and in the other hand, there's the socio-psychological revolutions. The distinction between the two is important to an understanding of what was involved and of what it portends. The political manifestations are in some respects easier to dissect and analyze. Broadly speaking, they fell into two categories. In the West, and particularly in the United States, the politically motivated militants drew on both the ideological legacy of the old left's attack against capitalist society and on the more recent sense of outrage about the war in Vietnam. As the, quote, imperialist and, quote, capitalist society par excellence, the United States provided the major target. The war served as a catalyst for emotions, as the basis for international unity among the young militants, as a bond between the old leftists and the new, and as a link between the politically minded and the ethically concerned. The little footnote down here, we'll go read that. It says, the war thus served the same function as the earlier campaigns against nuclear bombs in allowing for the expression of essentially moral concerns by the adoption of an anti-United States political posture. So there's this linking between the people's sense of moral outrage and then turning that against the capitalistic United States, and that's been done on purpose. That's by design. That's social engineering par excellence, right? I'll give you a great example. I went to a friend's house many years ago, and she lived in this house with her friend. They both jointly owned the house, two girls. And I said, hey, what's the Wi-Fi? And they're like, oh, it's on the fridge. So I went to the fridge and Wi-Fi password, smash the patriarchy. which is great, right? Smash the patriarchy. Get rid of the men. Don't put any men in positions of power or authority or control or responsibility or competence. Such an simplistic kind of sloganeering that is designed to be emotional and not really be accurate or true. And another good example, during the Black Lives Matter protests, which occurred during lockdowns, and here in England were protected by police. The police were escorting the Black Lives Matter protesters up, and protecting them. And they had these slogans, like walking down the street with these signs, and the signs are saying like, "Smash the system," bring down capitalism, and I just had to be like, "What? Smash the system," which protects you as you're walking down the street on a busy day in a city center, clogging up the traffic, causing chaos, ripping down statues, chucking it in rivers. They're allowing you to do this. They're providing you with the signs and the slogans and the protection to express this sentiment, and you want to destroy the system that's allowing you to do that. Like, stupid. Like, I don't know. That's the only word for it. Stupid. And so this is kind of what he's describing here, although he's just leaving out that it was manipulated to be that way. And he's saying that the moral and the ethical outrage because of the US's actions in Vietnam were turned against the capitalist system, and then the US's capitalist system. And then if you're outraged at that capitalist system, you start to drift towards the socialism, communism side of the aisle. And then you've got like the Fabian socialists sort of waiting to scoop you up, and all the other sort of communists out there. So it's very genius, because if you want to bring down or merge two systems, and we know by way of Worms's book Foundations, which we're going to be reading next on the channel. There you go. That's the front cover. Kind of pointless showing you that, wasn't it? There you go. That's the side. Foundations. That's coming up next on the channel. We know by way of that book that the foundations, the big foundations, had the task of merging the USSR system, the communist system, and the capitalist system in the West, and creating the third system, the third way. So this can be seen as part of that, right? You get the young, the leftists to be outraged, to take up this moral and this ethical cause, and then you sort of attach to it the blame on, it's capitalism's fault. If it wasn't for all these greedy capitalists who want their money, causing wars and murdering Vietnamese people, and then it goes on from there, right? So it's pretty clever. LJ says, "With that a mini rant, Nick?" Yes, I think that was that probably classes as a mini rant. There you go. Didn't take me long, did it? We haven't even finished reading one page yet. So, we'll carry on with this footnote. He says, Frank Parkin, in his book Middle Class Radicalism, The Social Basis of the British Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, published by Manchester in 1968, shows how the British CND, which is the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, mobilized middle-class support, drawn from among those with a tradition of moral concern, into a campaign against, quote, evil. The campaign relied heavily on small symbolic gestures, such as eccentric dress, beards, and other forms of distinctive behavior. So we did read this section last week, but I couldn't remember exactly where we got cut off, so I thought we'd go back and revisit it. So I did mention these symbolic gestures, the eccentric dress, beards, and other forms of distinctive behavior. That is all like Tavistockian type social engineering, They do it now with Movember, right? So in November, men are encouraged to grow a mustache, so that's why it's Movember. And growing this mustache apparently cures testicular cancer or something. I don't know. I don't quite get the the link between it. But it raises awareness. We need to raise awareness, right? It's always the phrase that they throw out there. Raise awareness by taking part in the Ice Bucket Challenge or something. So they give you these little symbolic gestures, these eccentric behaviors, which they're like you take part in it to show you belong, right? It's like changing your profile picture or putting a little blue and yellow filter over your profile picture on social media to show that I stand with Ukraine. Okay, it's a symbolic gesture that actually does nothing, achieves nothing, but you're saying, I think in the approved way, right? I I belong to the hive mind is basically what it's saying. But they don't think it's saying that. They think it's I'm showing bravery and solidarity with poor oppressed people, right? But actually they're just saying it's like the Life of Brian sketch, you know. You are all individuals. And then they're all like, we are all changing our profile picture to blue and yellow because we are individuals. And it's just the same sort of thing. It's performative. It doesn't achieve anything, and but it's useful to people like us, the non-conformists, because we can go, oh right, we see you who the conformists are now, right? So yeah, that was quite a very interesting passage there that they talked about the symbolic gestures. And on the topic of this CND, the British CND, just as a side note, Bertrand Russell was involved with that group. That was part of his role, was to be the guy who was sort of pacifist and didn't believe in war and wanted to rouse the left, the intellectual left, the middle class, and get them to join this moral crusade against war and in the name of pacifism, right? But like always, whenever you join a group or a movement, it's serving a purpose that is part of the plan. And this is why groups are ineffective and dangerous, and you're better off working on yourself as an individual and honing your individual talents, your creative skills, and the things that you enjoy doing, and particularly the things that you enjoy doing in service of others, right? What can you do to make life better for other people? That's a better way and a more effective way than just joining a group and growing a mustache and putting a bucket of ice water on your head and changing your profile picture to whatever color it is that you're supposed to change it to this month. All right, on with the book. Those motivated by strictly political concerns appear to have been a relatively small minority of the restless youth, but they provided influential leadership. Okay, so the ones who actually care about politics are a very small minority. Most people are just emotional, and they're just being pulled along by their emotions, okay? And they're being led by those who do have political concerns. It was the politically minded who resuscitated the anarchist critique of organized society, who revived the Trotskyite slogan of the permanent revolution, and it was they who defined the more specifically political objectives, such as the call for immediate United States withdrawal from Vietnam. As the movement gained momentum and broadened its appeal, the political objectives, perhaps responding to the less clearly defined ethical and psychological needs of the following, were widened and became both vaguer and more demanding. It was no longer a matter of ending a particular governmental policy or of effecting a specific reform. The underlying system, capitalist in character and hence fundamentally irremediable. Right, I gotta have to look that one up as well. I think irremediable is going to mean something like irredeemable. Irremediable. Do you know, it's actually, given that what I do on this channel, it's not that often that I have to drag up the dictionary live on a, on a live stream, but it shows you the level that this book's written at, that I've had to do it twice in one stream. Irremediable, not admitting of remedy, cure, or repair. So actually has a similar meaning to irredeemable, although, or unfixable, right? Let's try thesaurus.com for the same word. Boop. Oh, that's not it. Irremediable. Hopeless. Okay, yeah, hopeless. Why didn't he just say hopeless? Beyond recall. Demoralized, discouraging, helpless. Incurable. That's probably, I think, irreparable. That's probably a good one as well. So he used the word irremediable, and we can just sort of substitute the word irreparable. Yeah, so because and I think this is in the young revolutionaries' view, the system is capitalist in character, and therefore it is irreparable. It's broken. It's exploitative because they have been indoctrinated with the sort of Marxist thinking. thanks to probably in large part the Fabian Society and their penetration and permeation. And therefore, because this underlying system was irremediable, had to be undone before true reforms could be achieved. Right. So that's this planting this movement, this hatred of capitalism in people's minds. This is why you have today, in the present day, people will openly call themselves Marxist and communist, and they'll wear red with the hammer and sickle, and they'll have it's the amount of death that went on. I've said this many, many times, but the amount of death that went on under communism tells me that it should be just as unacceptable to go around calling yourself a communist as it is to go around calling yourself a Nazi, right? Because horrific atrocities took place under that, but it's not. So that tells you that's such an important point. When I realized that, when I heard someone else point it out, I didn't make that observation myself, but when I heard someone else point it out, I thought, yeah, that's a really good point. It tells you quite a lot. It's quite amazing, really. But you can go around and call yourself a communist openly, no problem, no worries. Good, celebrate it. In fact, there's like Marxist and communist events and groups still active. Even though those movements killed millions. But that's what he's describing here, that indoctrinating of the radical revolutionary left who are concerned with the ethics and the morals of war and the Vietnam War specifically, scooping that moral outrage up and pointing it and directing it into hatred of capitalism, and therefore making them useful idiots who are going to call for tearing the system down. So continuing, the specifics remained obscure, while the programmatic language ranged from Cohn-Bendit's exaltation of action and rejection of communism to a rather simplistic repetition of Marxist cant. And there's another footnote here, which is, the following may serve as an example. Quote, Marxism is coming more and more to be the common denominator of all student movements in North America and Western Europe, even so in the new left SDS in the United States. I think this is inevitable and is a tribute to the growing sophistication and maturity of the international student new left, inasmuch as Marxism is the most developed, refined, and coherent revolutionary philosophy or worldview today, and one that as a systematic social theory corresponds to the objective realities of the capitalist era, and inasmuch as it testifies to the realization by the student movements that they must align themselves with the working class in order to achieve the type of social transformation requisite to break the power of monopoly capital and create a new, non-repressive, and truly free social order. I feel so motivated and inspired just reading that. That's from Stanley Gray, and it was a speech that he delivered in 1968 at the Kuchiching Conference, printed in McGill News, November 1968. But yes, very rousing, but quite an admission. Marxism, the common denominator of all student movements in North America and Western Europe, all by design, thanks to the Fabian socialists in large part, I would say, who Bertrand Russell was close to. And, of course, I just mentioned Bertrand Russell in connection with Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. I should also mention as well that we did a reading of one of his books. It's called Has Man a Future? That is on YouTube. It's not on Rumble and Odyssey. But if you go to the playlist tab on YouTube, you can find that Has Man a Future? Short book. It was one of the earliest books I did, actually. I'd probably have more to say about it if I read it now, 2 years into the channel. But we did read through it, and it's a lot of like fear-mongering about nuclear weapons and, oh, we're going to annihilate each other unless something be done, unless we have a world government to control all the weapons and, same kind of rhetoric. Terror, we're all going to die unless we have a world government. That's basically it in a nutshell. But let us continue. In the initial phases of the campaign against the Vietnam War, communist support, judging from approving communist pronouncements, was perhaps involved, But communist approval waned rapidly when the anti-institutional character of the movement became increasingly evident. In the eyes of many political militants, the communist system also represented bureaucratic conservatism, since its original revolutionary ideals had fossilized into institutional beliefs. Communist endorsement gradually shifted to criticism and then to condemnation. The views of the militant New Left were characterized by a Soviet writer as Mamaism, which incorporates ideas of Marx, Marcuse, and Mao, a completely artificial combination. I have never heard of Mamaism before, but there you are. That's a new ism for you to research and look into. Though the political manifestations in Mexico City, Madrid, Prague, and Warsaw partook of the same reaction against institutionalized belief and similarly capitalized on some of the ethical and psychological strains in modern society, they were much more specific in focus, less predisposed toward emotion, and more inclined toward a programmatic political approach. In all four cases, the demonstrators' demands were concerned with the loosening of direct political restraints, and the leaders did not have to construct an elaborate, one-dimensional man thesis to prove that liberal democracy can also be oppressive and that its tolerance is in fact a masked form of constraint. Well, that's quite interesting, that one. That democracy can also be oppressive. And remember, one of the first books that the Trilateral Commission put out was called something like The Crisis or A Crisis in Democracy. And one of the things they apparently said in that book, I haven't read it, so I don't know for sure, but one of the things they apparently said was, the problem with democracy is we've got too much of it, and we need to get rid of some of it. And copies of that book are pretty expensive, but you can get the electronic copy fairly easily. So that's the dialectic, right? I remember I went on a podcast once, and I was asked about American politics and what's going on there, and I said, what I find is that I agree with both the left and the right, and what I agree with them with is their criticisms of the other side. So all the problems that the right has with the left, I agree with, and all the problems that the left has with the right, I agree with. And whatever side of any of these dialectics you ever end up on, there's always a convincing narrative. There's always plenty of evidence to justify your beliefs and your position and your choice of which side to be on. Because both sides are bad. Both sides have problems. And both sides have lofty goals and good aims and values that you can also identify with, right? The dialectics are designed in that way. It's exactly like wars are fought between good guys and good guys. There's no combatants on the battlefield who are like, we're the bad guys and we're going out over there to kill those good guys over there, right? The narrative that you believe as a soldier is that you are the good guy and you're defending something good. Otherwise, you wouldn't be out there putting your life on the line. You wouldn't be willing to kill strangers that you've never met for money. So there's always an equally convincing and effective and crafted narrative on both sides of any dialectic that people could fall into. Otherwise, nobody would fall for either one. So it has to be this way, right? So there has to be problems with democracy for the people who are anti-democratic, the people who are going to help usher in this third system where they merge the communist system with the democratic capitalist system. You got to have valid criticisms of democracy to point to and say, look, it's not working. We've got to overhaul this and come up with something better, right? But to continue, as a result, at least on the political level, their demands took the familiar form of the rejection of overt political dictatorship, abolition of censorship, the right of free assembly, freedom to travel, political democracy, and the abandonment of both ideological monopoly and oppression by secret police. The similarity of the politically libertarian demands of the students in these four cities is striking. Yes, almost as though all of these movements were organized and arranged and planned by the same people, just in four different places. Yeah, but no, it's just That's a conspiracy theory to say that, isn't it? To say that all revolutions are planned and they know how to do it because they got a playbook hidden away somewhere of how to foment a revolution in a certain place. It's a formula. It's as Alan Watt would say, there's methodologies and techniques that are known at the highest levels, and they know how to whip up a frenzy and get a bunch of people murdering another bunch of people. And they know how to overthrow a regime and install a new regime that is under their control. Okay, so this is a good example of, in my opinion, I don't know for sure, but I would surmise that Zbigniew is, yes, he's running cover again. It's so strange how these four movements were so similar in these four different places. Isn't that interesting? How striking. What a striking coincidence. Well, it was probably the same people behind them. I'm sure if you looked into it and you had access to that information and the records, you would probably find some links between the people running these revolutions in these different places. Frank Lennon says, Stalin, 6 to 20 million dead. Pol Pot, 1 to 3 million dead. Yeah, exactly. And yet it's still all right to go around calling yourself a communist. Nuts. Bitcoin Mining says, an idea which is quite inspiring, I find. A book or piece of literature which is read is revered for the ink-scribed content. But if there were no paper to write it on, there would be nothing. So what is more important? An interesting philosophical question. That is an interesting one. Came out of nowhere. I'll have to get back to you on that one. A book is a piece of literature which is read, is revered for the ink-scribed content. But if there were no paper, there would be nothing. If there were no paper, people would memorize things, because this is what they did before they had printing presses, and they would write everything down. And this was one of the fears that was expressed when books started to become mainstream and popular. It was like, well, nobody's going to be able to remember anything anymore because people will just write it down in books and forget it. And it's been the same thing every time there's been a lurch forward in technological production of information. Now we got AI. We're not remembering anything because we got a little gadget that talks to us and will tell us everything we need to know instantly whenever we need to know it. But they've had the same concern at every sort of iteration and stage of information production and publishing. So yeah, if there was no picture, the information would still exist, but it would be in people's memories, certain people's memories, and wouldn't be anywhere near as widely disseminated, that's for sure, because the people who didn't know that stuff would be very high level, protected, wealthy, influential, powerful, because you could use that knowledge differential as a lever by which you can control and enslave and manage other people, which is the story of history, basically. Bitcoin Mining says, but then they would give their version. When it's written down, anyone can interpret it. Yes. But it depends how, when I said they memorize it, I'm thinking they memorize it like verbatim, kind of like Homer did with, was it Homer? Did with like the Iliad and the Odyssey. These were originally just memorized and recited, and that's why they're written with a certain structure to the sentences and rhymes, so that it makes it easier to memorize if there's a rhythm, like you memorize song lyrics much more easily because there's a rhythm and a melody to go with them. It's much easier to remember words that way than it is to remember just pages of text without any rhythm or melody to go with them. So yeah, I don't know. It is interesting. I don't know off the top of my head the answer, but certainly since the introduction of printed methods of recording and passing on information, then people's minds have lost, or at least have become less effective at remembering and recalling and passing on that information, for sure. But let's get back to the book, otherwise we'll never get anywhere. Where were we? It should also be noted that the students who demanded direct political freedom acted in the context of a much more hostile political environment. The student militants in the United States, in Western Europe, and in Japan literally basked in publicity. Front page pictures, television interviews, ecstatic endorsements by middle-aged supporters, epic songs immortalizing their deeds, and books in which the various confrontations were recorded in prose and in photographs. Given the pluralistic nature of the Western societies and the competitive character of their communications media, youthful militancy was rewarding to the ego and thus also infectious. Yeah, and this is covered, this is touched upon in the 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television book as well by Jerry Mander. He talks about a similar sort of thing. Like, how effective would these movements be if you couldn't broadcast them and get everyone's eyeballs on them and make everybody aware of them by way of the media? This factor must be taken into account both in analysing the dynamics of events in the West and in comparing them with events in less pluralistic societies. There, the mass media either ignored the demonstrations or condemned them. Well, our mass media still does that, doesn't it? I remember the lockdown protests getting heavily ignored by the BBC. Or if they did cover it, there were like thousands of people showed up to a lockdown protest, and it was easily tens of thousands. The student leaders were abused and arrested. Communications between institutions, not to speak of cities, required great personal effort, sacrifice, and risk. Youthful militancy was not rewarded with social acclaim. Madrid and Warsaw responded with prison sentences for the leaders and university expulsion for the participants. The political environment clearly helped to shape the emphasis and the scope of the students' demands. In a strict authoritarian context, the demands had a politically libertarian content. In a looser, more pluralistic environment, the demands were either focused on more immediate university affairs or took on the form of a broader and thus inevitably somewhat vaguer social critique. Accordingly, the more specific and libertarian character of the demands made by the student leaders in the authoritarian states provided little basis for a common front with the militants of the West. In fact, there does not appear to have been much actual contact and coordination, although it was charged in the Poland's political youth trials in late 1968 that the Brussels headquarters of the Fourth International Trotskyite provided ideological assistance to some Polish activities. If the charge is true, the Trotskyite link was perhaps the sole connection between political activists in the West and in the East. So there you are, he's telling you right there that there was no link between them. It was just a spontaneous, disconnected happening, no connection, even though the similarities of all 4 events were striking. The 2 movements appear to have been independently led and to have been motivated by profoundly different political aspirations. The slight direct contact that there was between the respective leaders turned out to be abortive. In 1968, in a BBC discussion of the student rebellion, the leader of the English militants attacked the spokesman of the Yugoslav students, while the head of the West Berlin SDS received a rather cool reception from Prague students who found his political views primitive. And there's a footnote. It's also noteworthy that strictly politically oriented student movements in Mexico, Spain, or Poland avoided such manifestations as the foul language splinter that developed in California in the aftermath of the crisis. The fascination with drugs and the deliberate adoption of deviant social behavior, as in the case of the yippies. To be sure, these manifestations were also the product of peculiarly American conditions, but their appearance as a side effect of the student rebellion was made possible by the less focused and also less oppressed character of the rebellion. So one of the things that just occurred to my mind there, where I'm thinking about his writing, what he's saying, what his purpose is, what his motivation is, I think part of it is his ability to weave together a narrative and an explanation of events that leaves out the hidden hand and the world controllers, the controlling factor behind the events that connects them all. I think that's probably what catches the attention of this class of people and gets them to say, hey, let's bring this guy on board. and let's start a brand new think tank with him. I'm just going to have a sip. Excuse me a second. It would make sense that if you have an ability to explain things and history in a way that leaves out the actual perpetrators and planners, then you would be very useful. You would be a very useful person indeed to these people. And I'll mention as well, when I'm saying that, I'm thinking of Carol Quigley, because, of course, we know in Carol Quigley's admissions and revelations in Tragedy and Hope caused the publisher, Macmillan, to destroy the plates and lie to the people who were saying they wanted copies of the book. So the book sold out. The first print sold out. Then there was a lot of demand coming in, and they lied to people saying we're not printing a second run until a certain number of people want it. And then they lied to Quigley as well, saying nobody's asking for it, nobody wants it. Okay, I'm just wondering if I got an error message. I got an error message there. Was there a problem with the stream? Let me know. I don't want to keep going just in case it's all gone Pete Tong again. I really hope I don't have to buy a new laptop. It shouldn't be that drastic. Everything looks okay. Stream is fine. Let's keep going. Good. And thank you for the feedback. I appreciate it. The warning that pops up is so hard to catch. It's like a thin line at the bottom of the program there. But good. We're good. So we'll keep going. Nevertheless, important similarities between the respective political youth movements should also be noted. In both cases, they were led by the abler students who, on the whole, came from more socially established families. Oh, that's an interesting little tidbit, isn't it? It's kind of like the Fabian Socialists, who were middle class and fairly well-to-do by comparative to the working class. They were in a good situation, and yet they're coming along and saying, oh, we really care about all these people, and we want to reform the systems, and we want to give rights to other people, and it's a bit suspicious, isn't it? So these are socially established families. Reminds me as well of the links between the military and the music industry, the music military industrial complex, and how so many of these pop stars were given to us seem to come from families with military backgrounds. Dave McGowan did good work on this. Mark Devlin sort of picked it up and ran with it in his 4 books as well. It's a similar kind of phenomenon. But continuing, according to a study conducted at the University of California, the arrested undergraduate and graduate students tended to have much better than average grades. Many of them held scholarships or had won awards. In Poland, official comment made much of the fact that the activists came from the relatively well-to-do homes of officials, and some university professors stressed the fact, in conversation with this writer, that their best students were involved. After the demonstrations were suppressed, measures were taken to favour the admission into the university of workers' and peasants' children. Even in Romania, where student unrest was suppressed relatively quickly, official reaction emphasised the fact that the young hooligans were in the main children of building site managers, university professors, instrumentalists in the Philharmonic Orchestra, physicians, engineers, white-collar workers, militia staff members. So there you go. That's another little clue that I think is worth noting that suggests these events were orchestrated, planned, manufactured, manipulated by the same kinds of people. So continuing. As in the West, the political leadership for the restless young was in many cases provided by the offspring of former left activists, hence not by rebels against the older generation, but rather by young people who shared the ideals of their parents, but felt that these had been corrupted in practice by the ruling communist elite. In Poland, the most outstanding student rebels included the children of high party officials, while in the United States, children of the old left formed a high percentage of the activist leaders at Columbia and Berkeley. In both the East and the West, the rebel leaders came from environments that were not indifferent but ideologically concerned. I'm getting that same error again. It sort of pops on, tells me things are going badly, and then disappears. Yeah, it's disappeared again. So we seem to be right on the edge, pushing my laptop to the very edge of its capabilities. But I don't think there's much I can do about it, especially not while we're live. So we'll just have to keep going. Another similarity between the student militants in the West and in the East was the vagueness of their long-range objectives. Though the specific and immediate goals of the students in the more politically oppressive regimes were somewhat more precise, their demands went rarely beyond a statement of immediate complaints. To be sure, the transformation of a police dictatorship into a multi-party democracy, or at least into something resembling the Yugoslav model, was a more defined objective, with experiential examples available, than the Western students' plea for a participatory democracy. However, the more specific ramifications of the desired social and political systems tended to be vague in the East as well as in the West. So yeah, so that you've whipped up these young people into a frenzy. You've got the middle classes on board, ethically and morally outraged. Oh, I just lost my place. And and they've signed on, and they're marching, and they're taking part, and they're making themselves heard and known. But there's no demands. There's no long-term plan. There's no real, true understanding of what they want to happen. They're just out on the streets, stomping up and down, speaking out, getting arrested, getting thrown into prison, because they want to be part of a movement. They know, it's like they know something's wrong, and because so many of us have that sense that something is wrong, something is very, very wrong, in fact, with our systems and our cultures and our societies, that these movements, I think, are provided to hoover up those people who sense that something's wrong. This is why you shouldn't join a group or a movement unless you are... Well, I'll just leave it at that. I'll just say you shouldn't. I don't know of any group or movement that is really getting anything done or has gotten anything done in the past, apart from getting things done that are part of the plan, because everything that happened in the past brought us to where we are today, which is right on the edge, on the verge of the building and creation of this like absolute total digital control system. So people sense something's wrong, and they start looking around for explanations about what's wrong, and then somebody's there going, I'll tell you what's wrong. It's capitalism. Capitalism, it's exploitative. It leads to wealth accumulating in the hands of too few people. You know, the workers are not respected. They don't get good rights. They don't get they get their they get the products of their labor taken off them, and it's down to greedy capitalists and capitalism itself, right? And then you go, oh, that's what's wrong. Okay, cool. So what's the solution? Communism. Join our club. Let me show you more. I've got some pamphlets and leaflets, and come to a meeting, right? And this is how it happens. All these groups are prepared and waiting and just ready to hoover you in and take you on a goose chase down the rabbit hole. I don't know if geese go down rabbit holes, but keep you occupied and give you that sensation that you are part of something meaningful and important, and that's going to make a difference, and that's going to make a change and save the world. So he's touching on these kinds of ideas without telling you that this is by design, and this is technique, and this is methodology, and this is mass control 101. There's a footnote here, which is talking about this lack of defined goals across the East and the West protests. It says, one of the more extensive critiques of the existing Polish system was prepared by two young Warsaw sociologists, J. Kuron and K. Modzelewski, several years prior to the student outbreaks of March 1968. The authors were promptly sent to prison, he says. Entitled Open Letter to the Party, it became the source of much of the theoretical inspiration for the political-minded leadership of youth. Written from a Marxist point of view, it provided a scathing critique of the degeneration of Polish communism into an institutionalized bureaucratic despotism. Now, I'm just going to take issue with this word. Where is it? Degeneration. I don't think Marxism or communism degenerated into institutionalized bureaucratic despotism. Like institutionalized bureaucratic despotism, that is the name of the game. That is the end result of all the systems that we have and that we've been born into and that are on offer and that we are barreling into now. Only now it's going to be an AI-mediated, institutionalized, bureaucratic despotism. But that little three-word phrase there, I think, tells us basically everything we need to know. But that is the end result. That's the plan. That's the purpose. That is what happens. We've seen it in practice throughout history. So it's not a degeneration. It's not kind of like, well, they meant well. It started off really good. Or if only we did it properly, then it would work and be the best system ever. But unfortunately, it just degenerated into an institutionalized bureaucratic despotism. Oops. No, like institutionalized bureaucratic despotism is the purpose of these isms. And that's the purpose of the plan, because that is the controlling methodology that we're living under. So it was nice of him to provide us with that handy three-word phrase. I hadn't heard it put quite succinctly like that before. But, you know, from now on, if you ever meet someone who's starting to wake up and go, no, something's not right here, you can say, institutionalized bureaucratic despotism. 3 words for you, and that'll clear it up for them then and there. And then send them to continuityofcontrol.com, where they can get my 9-part email series about the 70 years. And that's not... And my email series isn't complete or total. It's just a snapshot of 70 years of that continuity. It goes back much further. I'm sure it'll go out much further into the future, but it captures just 70 years of that continuity. But by no means is my series complete and giving you the full chronology and timeline. It's just to illustrate that it is a decades, if not centuries old plan that is ongoing, that is unfolding. And it's really just the tip of the iceberg. But if you do know somebody who's starting to wake up a little bit, you can say, hey, institutionalized bureaucratic despotism, continuitycontrol.com. Thank me later. But to go back to the footnote. So there's a critique saying that communism degenerated with vested interests suppressing the egalitarian idealism of socialism. Right, yes, it's those pesky vested interests subverting the idealism of socialism, which would be really good if we just did it properly. When it came to offering a program, however, the authors confined themselves to urging a new revolution led by workers and intellectuals determined to create a new social order characterized by few institutions, workers' self-government, and true social egalitarianism. In late 1968, Kuron and Modzelewski were again sentenced to prison for having allegedly inspired the March events in collusion with the Fourth International Trotskyite. So what he said there is that when it came to offering a program, so when it came to offering an alternative, something that would work, a program that would address the problems that they're pointing out and criticizing, they really just said more Marxism, which is what the whole thing started off with in the first place. But let's continue with the main body of the text. We're up here at the top of page 105. Though this may have been a weakness from the strictly political point of view, as was charged by the critics of the militants, it also helped to provide a wider bridge between the political leadership and the more generally restless younger generation. It is doubtful, and this is especially true of the more pluralistic societies, whether a highly specific political program would have attracted the wide support generated by the more undifferentiated attack against the establishment, vested interest, the status quo, and institutionalized beliefs. The reliance on emotion rather than on reason, on felt aspirations rather than on concrete programs, struck a more responsive chord in a generation that was the most directly affected by the pace of contemporary change, and that was the very product of that change. It was a pretty interesting section there, actually. Histrionics as history in transition. So the next bit is historical discontinuity. In our time, the student generation represents one of the most dynamic variables of change. The growth in their number, as well as the simultaneous growth in the number of radios, televisions, telephones, all items that affect personal relationships, both making possible and encouraging the rapid dissemination of ideas, make for a subjectively dynamic mood that stands in sharp contrast to the relatively slow rate of change in such items as income, the switch from rural to urban employment, the population shift to larger urban centres, or the average number of people living in a room. The overall result is the contradiction already noted in the preceding chapter between the pace of change in the state of mind and in material reality. There was a lot in that little paragraph there, but what he's describing is how, with the new abilities provided by communication technologies to disseminate information, change can be accelerated and pushed through faster and quicker and more rapidly. So you don't even need necessarily a crisis or a wartime scenario. I don't know who said it. Alan Watt quoted it a lot, but someone somewhere said that you could get a lot more change pushed through during wartime than you could during peacetime. And for that reason, wartime was exploited as an opportunity to advance, the agenda, because really it's all just one agenda that we're analyzing and learning about, describing here. And it was the same with the Big C, lockdowns. The advance was rapid during that time. A lot of emergency powers, a lot of legislation pushed through, a lot of contracts signed, a lot of, what's the word? Immunity given. And I'm not talking about human beings' immunity. I'm talking about immunity of certain pharmaceutical companies and organizations, right? So it's almost like now that they've put the TVs in all the houses and the telephones in all the living rooms, and this was in 1970, and in the present day, they've put all the smartphones, hooked us all up to the internet, and just bombard us with information 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 a year. Change can be accelerated and pushed through even quicker, because they can change the mind faster than they can change the material reality. And that's what he was touching on earlier in the book. One of the things that he mentions here is the population shift to large urban areas. And this was mentioned in Wednesday's reading of First Global Revolution. And I went a bit nuts ranting about this, because the way they described it in here was that people living in rural areas just began drifting into urban areas. just drifting on a breeze. There was a breeze, and it just picked up those little rural farmers and peasants and whatnot, and they just drifted into the cities. And I think it's a real oversimplification, and it doesn't acknowledge the war that was waged on rural life and rural communities to force them out and into the cities. There's a classic example of this that Alan Watt talks about a lot, which is the Highland clearances, and it's covered in this book by John Preble, The Highland Clearances. Okay, and that's published by Secker and Warburg. Warburg, shifty name. This one is the 1963 edition. So you get people off the land and into the cities because they're easy to control. You can farm them. You can get more tax out of them. You can control them more because it's just easier to control people in a controlled environment, right? But when they're on the land, they've got some sufficiency, they've got some ability to provide for themselves. They don't need you and your despotic bureaucracy to rule over their lives, and so it's important to push people off the land and into the cities. But Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Club of Rome, they talk about it like it was just this organic, natural phenomenon. Oh, people just wanted to go there. The youth just wanted to live there. The opportunities, and they wanted to earn money there. And I think it's a gross oversimplification of how that change actually happened. But it's not surprising that they both gloss over the actual the actual reality of it. So, continuing. In the words of a student of modernization, contemporary man, and this is especially true of the younger generation, is less under the domination of his environment, and to this extent he is freer. But at the same time, he is less certain of his purpose, and in times of great unrest, he is prepared to surrender his freedom in the interest of purposeful leadership. Ooh, that's quite a juicy quote, isn't it? I want to see where that one's from. So that's number 43. But yeah, people do tend to, and it's not just men, but people do tend to give up their freedom for the promise of, safety, security, and comfort. And this student of modernization is such a mysterious way to refer to someone. It's from a book called The Dynamics of Modernization, which is by an author whose last name presumably is Black. Now, that could be a person with a one-word name, like Seal or Bjork. Maybe they're just called Black. But my guess is it's probably their last name. And the book is Dynamics of Modernization. So that's an interesting quote. Continuing. In that fluid setting, the present becomes difficult to comprehend since it is no longer defined by either religion or nationalism or historical ideological perspectives. Writing about the waning of the Middle Ages, the historian Johann Huizinga described a world of discontinuity, a world marked by the collapse of traditional beliefs, uncertainty about eternal salvation, widespread pessimism, and intense violence. Psychological refuge was sought by many in mystical cults, while individual behavior was dichotomized, ranging from emphasis on the saintly to indulgence in depravity and cruelty. Shifts from one extreme to the other were common, as men desperately sought social anchorage in absorbing commitment. A similar crisis, marked by much more secular forms of expression, occurred again in the West when nationalism and industrialization combined to change the character of society. Massive national and class conflicts, as well as acute social and psychological tension, spawned all-encompassing ideologies that seemed to provide both authority and a sense of direction. Writing about the cataclysm of World War II, Czesław Miłosz, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, but he wrote a book, or she wrote a book called The Captive Mind, drew perceptive portraits of Eastern European intellectuals as they moved from one faith to another in a search for the personal stability that their environment failed to provide. Today's mood has many parallels, but it also differs significantly in scope and content. The Industrial Revolution, to say nothing of the culture of the Christian Middle Ages, was territorially confined, and only gradually, in the course of more than a century and a half, did it spill over to affect more and more societies. Its appearance was accompanied by the rise of nationalism and other secular ideologies, in which broad concepts were reinforced by the institutions embodying them. In contrast, the current crisis of institutionalized belief takes place in the context of the technotronic revolution, a revolution which is not territorial, but spatio-temporal. All right. Big ideas. What I liked about this bit is the way he talks about the rise of nationalism and secular ideologies. Ideologies don't just drift in on the breeze like people drift into cities. You know, they are, they're first concocted. They have to be defined and described. They have to be written down. You have to create them. They're created by men in most cases. And then they have to be written down and published and taught and spread around through the mechanisms of whatever, the media, the educational establishment, word of mouth, however you spread things, ideas, memes, in other words. So the idea that they just rise. What caused the rise? Propaganda. I got a book recently. Hang on, I'll probably grab it. It's just behind me. I can't remember where I put it. So I just got this one. It was really expensive for a long time. It was about 60 or 70 pounds, and then suddenly it just dropped down to like 10 quid. So I grabbed it. This is John Mackenzie, The Manipulation of British Public Opinion, 1880 to 1960, Propaganda and Empire. And it's quite an interesting book. It's got lots of pictures and examples of propaganda, and the thesis is how people during this time were made to feel proud of the empire, of the British Empire, and there was propaganda used to get the British public to be into this idea and to feel good about it, right? So it's just an example of how things like isms like nationalism and other secular ideologies, they don't just float in on the breeze spontaneously and randomly and organically, right? They get turned up and turned down by the social engineers through the propaganda, through the academics, the people who go on speaking tours, the leaders who are provided to all the groups and the movements. This is how these sort of things are turned up and turned down as needed, as required by the times, by the events, and by the planners, right? So there might be a time, and Frank says there's nothing wrong with love of nation, love of homeland, which would be called nationalism. Yeah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of these things. What I'm saying is that they serve a purpose, and there'll be times right now in England is a perfect example, right? You got all this people are putting flags up everywhere. English, they're putting the Union Jack and the St. George's Cross up all over the place. And the reason for this is because there's a massive amount of undocumented immigrants being housed in hotels up and down the country at the expense of the taxpayer. And people don't want this to happen anymore because life's getting expensive. It's getting hard to make ends meet. People are feeling the pinch, and prices are going up by the hour. It feels like it's absolutely crazy. And why are a bunch of strangers coming into our country and getting given goodies and hotels and phones and pocket money and all this other stuff when our own people, our own native citizens who live here and were born here are struggling and suffering? It doesn't make any sense on the face of it, right? So there's and I'm not very closely into this whole event. This is my quick and dirty summary of it. But in solidarity with the people who are protesting about this and saying, hey, why are we letting all these people in and paying for them? To show solidarity with that, people are putting up flags, English flags and Union Jack, Great Britain flags. And what happens is the people on one side of it are saying, well, it's because, like Frank says, I'm proud, I love my nation, I love my homeland, I wanted to protect it. I want to send a message. I want to do something, show solidarity, and be part of a movement. And then the people on the other side of it say that all the people putting these flags up are just racist, bigoted, hate-filled, far-right extremists who have no sympathy or compassion or empathy for people who come from war-torn countries, who are fleeing persecution, who are trying to move in order to find a better life for themselves and their family, because where they're from is pretty horrible. So there's two sides, right? That's my point. And both sides are propagandized. Both sides are shown a certain set of information by their algorithms. Both sides are given fuel to entrench their particular opinion and view and idea about this topic, this event, this contentious issue. And so to make this work, to make this divide and conquer play work, because it is a divide and conquer tactic and strategy, or at least the situation is being either manipulated for the purpose of divide and conquer, or it's being they're taking advantage of it to divide people, because they always do that. But in order to do that, they got to turn up the nationalism and crank it up. Put these flags up everywhere, right? And so you can fire people up by cranking up the nationalism dial, lead them into a conflict, lead them into some hate-filled act that's gonna result in, physical, horizontal violence, when it's always like a vertical. The real war is vertical. It's the social engineers at the very top of the pyramid on everybody underneath, which includes native borns, non-native borns, right? We're all underneath this pyramid that's sitting on top of the planet, the globe, the earth. But that vertical thing never happens. It's always a horizontal thing. It's always that group over there, and you go fight them. And the pitchfork people want to take the torches from the torch people, right? That classic cartoon. So my point is just to say that, to go back to the book, because we are here to read the book, not just to listen to Nick rant. When he talks about the rise of nationalism, again, it's an oversimplification. He's leaving out the fact that these things are used to manipulate people into getting all hot under the collar so that they will join groups, and the groups can then be led by the people who are part of the problem. There's Alan Watt has said many times, there's never any true organic grassroots movements. The leaders are always provided, the heroes are always provided, and even if one does start, it's going to be infiltrated and co-opted very quickly. And you only need to see how this happens on Telegram groups, for example, to know that it would happen in real life as well. And don't forget to link back to an earlier comment that I made. We are coached and we are manipulated into adoring actors, professional actors. We call them stars, and they give, they make crazy money, and they endorse products, and they're on our big screens, and we build, feelings and attachments to them, and we trust them, and we do what they say, and we buy the stuff that they endorse, and we go to see a film that they're in because we really like that actor, and these are the stars, and we follow the stars, right? And these actors, they're master manipulators, right? An actor is somebody who fakes emotion. They are false. They are able to deceive. the skill set that is required to be a good actor. I can see the frame rate dropping off. I'm going to pause. It's showing me that we're losing. Now we lost internet. Now we reconnected. All right, it looks good. From my side, we're green. It was struggling a little bit there for a second. Is all good on your side? Are you hearing and seeing? Hal 1984 says, grassroots are all astroturfed. That's a good one. I like that as well. Frank says, frozen again. What a pity. Am I still frozen right now? I just typed it in the chat to see if that will get through faster. Same issue as last time. It's dropping in and out. I can see it on my side. It's the same thing that happened last time. Well, we had a good run tonight. Lee Blunt says all good. Let's see how long we got left. I could push through perhaps to the end of the chapter. The point I was trying to make that the ghost of Zbigniew does not want me to make because he keeps invading my internet connection is that the leaders who are supplied and take over and infiltrate these groups are actors. Actors by their very nature are deceitful, and we are trained to admire and adore and look up to actors and worship them and follow the stars. Therefore, we are trained and coached and guided to worship people who are manipulative and fake and good at deceiving. That's the point I was trying to make. I don't know if any of that came through. Adam says it sounds like my internet. Do I have a limit to my upload? I shouldn't have. This should be super fast, whiz pop, whiz bang internet with no issues. Still having problems. LJ says the sound is okay. We can try this. You can watch this silly GIF of me wiggling my eyebrows, and I can talk over this image. What? The microphone just disappeared? Are you kidding me? I can talk over this image, and we'll see if that works or if it has the same problem. Hal 1984 says, turn it off and on again. Yeah, but the same thing happened last time. The sound was all right. The image started messing up, and then the sound went. So we'll try this. I've just got the sound is breaking up. This is a lot like last time. Okay. That's exactly what happened last time. Still the same. All right. I'm going to call it. We'll call it a night. Frustratingly. Call Tobias Elwood. I'll write that down. I don't even know who that is. Yeah, Rumble, same problems. Dick. Tobias Elwood, okay. Well, I think it's going to keep happening, so rather than pushing on and putting out something crap, we'll wrap it up here. So, we're going to have part 7, part 3 next week. We'll wrap it up here. I will find something to put on the screen as we end it. Yeah, I'll give that a try. I'll try turning it all off and rebooting it. I mean, our modem gets turned off every single night. It it's on that's a router. Sorry, the router gets turned off every single night. So yeah, seventh Brigade flak military tactic. I genuinely think it's a hardware issue. I don't think there's any shenanigans going on, but I don't know. Could be. My analysis is obviously just far too dangerous. Okay. Continuityofcontrol.com. Check that out, please, if you would. I would like very much to hear people's feedback and experiences on this. Hal984 says, reach out. I'm in IT. Thank you for that offer. Could you reach out to me? I can't send you a message on YouTube, but you should have my email address. It's easy to find. And so continuitycontrol.com, share that link around, send it to people, so we can get it into, more people who could benefit from being aware of these kinds of agendas. And irremediable, that was tonight's new word. Irremediable, and it means incurable or irreversible or irreparable or past hope and hopeless. So there you go. There's your new word for tonight as well. So thanks everybody for your patience and hanging in there. And I'm gonna have to do some digging on this tech issue we keep having, but we got a good 2 hours in tonight. So thank you all very much. I'm gonna be back next week. Have a wonderful evening and do good things for yourself and other people. Practice some of your God-given creativity. Put it to, I don't know, write a poem, paint a picture, build a compost heap in your garden. I don't know, do something like that and get out in nature and, enjoy reality. There's plenty of ways to plug into reality and unplug from all the fake nonsense that they bombard us with via our screens. So I encourage you to do that very much. Take it easy, everybody. I will see you next Friday, and have a great week. God bless.